Hi, I'm Jasmine Burton, and welcome to The Ask, where we turn questions into action. The 2024 election is upon us, and today we're featuring the powerhouses of the ballot box, Black women. And we have the perfect person to speak with us today. Today we have Nicole Austin-Hillery, the president and CEO of the CBC Foundation. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling exuberant today.
Right? I feel like that's just the energy surrounding this right now.
Absolutely. And everyone's been waiting for this day for history to be made. So I am so glad we're right here in this moment.
Have you slept?
Not as much as I would like. The days have been long, the nights have been long, but it's okay. It is a sacrifice well worth making, given all that's at stake.
That's what my mom is telling me. She's like, you can sleep any day, but this happens, maybe never again.
Exactly. So. And you don't want to say, I was asleep at the wheel when this happened.
Exactly. Before we get into the weeds of the election, the impacts that it will have and all of those good things, I think I'm familiar with your work and the work that CBC Foundation does. But to our viewers, audience members that may not be aware, what do you want them to know about your foundation?
Of course. So for those who don't know, the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation is what CBCF stands for, is an organization that has a very simple mission, and that is to empower the global Black community. We were started back in 1976. We're about to celebrate 50 years in 2026. And we were started by the original members of the Congressional Black Caucus because they saw a need. One of those needs was that they realized that there was really no pathway to leadership success for young Black students who were pursuing college degrees. We all know that having an internship on Capitol Hill is one of the pathways to success if you want a future in politics and as an elected official. But if you were not someone who was lucky enough to have someone basically underwrite that experience, you were left out. Because I don't know if most people know this, but interns aren't paid. And so you have to have someone who can help you have a roof over your head, allow you to, eat, sleep, do all those things. And they realized that there was a disparity in place and that Black students did not have those opportunities because they didn't have that support. And so they wanted to create a pipeline for leadership success, hence the creation of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. So that was one of our goals. The other goal was to ensure that we would have a think tank of sorts. This was before other think tanks that were focused on Black policy issues existed. And the members said, we need an institution that is going to look at what are the most salient issues within the Black community and how can we produce the research that is going to, one, help lawmakers, but number two, help the community, be a resource for community so that they can have information. And through that, and this is the third prong of what we do, we use those tools to educate the public. So we make certain that our reports are shared throughout the country, throughout the world. We have an annual legislative conference every year, which is ostensibly the largest Black public policy conference held in the country, where community members from all over, and when I say all over, I mean folks here in the nation as well as folks from other parts of the world, come together for 4 days in Washington, and we have brain trusts, we have policy discussions and sessions about the key issues that are affecting Black America. And so that is the function that we serve. So we want to make sure that we are creating a leadership pipeline, that we are producing information and materials that can help empower communities, and that we are on the ground educating communities about what they need to know so that they can be their own decision makers and be the voice for change within their own neighborhoods and states.
That's amazing and pivotal work. And you did mention the legislative conference, which I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is just a couple of weeks away.
It is 2 weeks and 2 days away.
Yeah, well, nice. That's amazing. Now we just timestamped the episode, which is perfect. You're doing my job better than me. What can we expect at this upcoming legislative conference?
You can expect for folks to come together to be focused on creating change. That's what this moment is about. Every year when we get together, folks want to talk about, what's happening in our communities around the country. What are members doing? What are the members of the Congressional Black Caucus doing in terms of their legislative agendas? But this year is even different because there's so much at stake. As we know, as we are heading into a national election, there is so much at stake when it comes to diversity, when it comes to equity and inclusion, when it comes to educational opportunities, when it comes to fighting against health disparities, when it comes to making sure sure that we can teach our children the information that we want to teach, that the scholarly work that includes all of America, not just certain portions of America, but all of America. We know those opportunities are being challenged. So all of that is at stake. So what you can expect is that the people who want to be on the front lines of protecting those issues and those rights, the people who want to be on the front lines of creating change and creating pathways to opportunities are all going to coalesce in Washington at our annual legislative conference to figure out how we can make change. And I want to remind people of this. We don't get together just so folks can talk.
Yeah.
We are about movement and action. And one of the things that we started last year was we had a mid-year review, if you will, so that folks could hear, well, what's been happening since the last annual legislative conference? We want people to know that this is not just a moment in time. This is the pinnacle of when we can all come together and talk about how we problem solve, how we strategize collaboratively. But that work needs to continue throughout the year. And so ALC, if you will, is the kickoff to setting the tone, to establishing what the priorities are, and then giving everyone the tools and the marching orders they need to then go out into their communities and be the change they want to see.
And that's the part to me that's so fascinating, is the giving the people's the tools part. I think so much so, especially me as like someone that's, in this policy phase, sometimes I feel bombarded with information, but no one telling me what I can do to actually change the current state of my life. So the fact that your approach is pronged in that way and heavily focused on the action piece, I feel like is probably one of the most influential parts.
Exactly. People ask me all the time, what can I do? So I love to tell people that we are putting information in your hands so that you can do what you can do. Everyone is a leader. Everyone. I don't care if you have a title. I don't care, if you run something. Everyone in their own way oversees something really important. And we all are engaged in our communities in some way. Some people are heavily involved in churches, some with civic associations, some with sororities and fraternities. But whatever it is, I remind people, find your corner of the sky, if you will, and find out how you can be an information sharer, find out how you can be a collaborator, find out how you can be a strategist, and be the change you want to see in your communities. That's what I tell people. Don't look to other people to create the kinds of differences that you want to see in your communities. And I think that's what our conference helps people to do. It helps people to be in the room with the scholars, the policymakers, the legislators, to be able to talk to them one-on-one. That's something that doesn't happen. People see their legislators on TV. They may see them in a committee hearing that's publicized on our broadcast on C-SPAN, but they don't have the opportunity to stop them in the hallway and say, here's what I'm thinking, or tell me about your legislative platform. That's what our annual legislative conference allows people to do. And then again, to empower them to go back and be champion leaders right where they sit.
And that proximity really matters. I think if you're in the same room as someone that's actually changing policy and you're, bumping shoulders with them, shaking hands with them, you kind of feel like, you know what, I can do something too. If I've made it this far, if I'm in this room next to this person, I can do something as well.
And it's also helpful for people to see these are real people.
Yeah.
These are real people. And, we're seeing it this week here in Chicago as you see the plethora of people that have been on stage, that have been talking. These are real folks. So many of the members are people who became legislators, who became leaders because they were folks who were living in their communities, were engaged, who saw what needed to be done. They might have been, the mothers who were dealing with educational issues. They might have been the fathers who were dealing with transportation issues. And those are the things that propelled them into leadership. So for people to see, these are individuals who live in communities like mine, who have families like mine, who have the same priorities and concerns as I do, that makes a difference.
And while we're on the topic of the issues, I think that CBC and the CBC Foundation has been at the forefront of teaching our community about the issues facing us, whether that be Black women's maternal health, Black men's mental health, even something that I was completely unaware of, but how disparately impacted Black people are by the climate crisis.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that education piece is so important. What should be at the forefront of voters' minds as they're going to the ballot box this year? What issues are we maybe not thinking about that are really affecting us that we should be paying attention to?
Well, I want to name the issues that folks I know are already probably thinking about, because I think it's important to reiterate those.
Okay.
Folks should be thinking about Black wealth and economics.
Yeah.
That's key. And sometimes, as folks think about the economy, we hear people talking about inflation, about the economy, but folks need to be very clear that there is a huge disparity in terms of Black wealth in this country.
Yeah.
And if we want to level the playing field, that has to be a priority. Health disparities, as we continue to be on year 4 of the COVID pandemic, continues to rear its ugly head. Everyone needs to be focused on that. And again, health disparities, there's something people weren't really necessarily thinking about prior to COVID. COVID allowed us to see that health disparities exist. It is a priority for us at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We hold a Policy for the People Health Summit every year because we want to center these issues.
Yeah.
Folks should also be very concerned about education.
Yeah.
We know that in the courts this year, we've seen attacks on affirmative action. There are problems in terms of access to education. There's also problems in terms of what our students are learning, what they are able to be taught, what they have the freedom to teach, what they have the freedom to learn. So I want to make sure that we underscore the continued importance of those issues. But I want to make sure that people are not asleep on technology.
Yeah.
One of the issues that we center at the foundation is artificial intelligence and looking at that technology and how it impacts communities. With every technological advancement, there sometimes is an issue that we weren't prepared for. There are unintended consequences. And when we're talking about artificial intelligence, that deals with issues around privacy. Sometimes when it comes to, the creation of this technology and when we look at how it helps the communities, often the unintended consequences are things that fall very heavily on Black and brown communities. So our communities need to be focused on that as well. But our communities also need to be focused on how do we ensure that we protect the right to vote.
Yeah.
That never goes away. That always has to be a primary issue. I tell people, I've worked on voting rights issues for many years in my career. And I tell people that one of the biggest issues in this country is not just voter suppression, and we know there are lots of tactics to suppress the vote, but it's just getting people engaged in wanting to be a part of our electoral process. That is the biggest opportunity you have to have a voice in what goes on in this country. We are all equalized. The playing field is leveled when you go into that ballot box and you close the curtain. So helping people to understand and realize that that is your true power in a democracy. When you go into that ballot box and get to say what you believe, what you want, and who you want to represent you, that is what's most important. And I've been in conversations. Recently I was on a panel discussion at one of the major universities in Washington, and I actually had one of the college students say to me, well, what if we just let this whole experiment in democracy fail and rebuild it? That kind of question frightens me.
Yeah, me as well.
And that it is moments like that when I have to reinforce the importance of the voice that you have in this democracy, and that we all have a stake in protecting it and continuing to build it up and making sure that we are engaged in it. So that's what I want people to focus on.
And what's exciting? I feel like people are starting to be engaged. I can even feel it in the energy in Chicago right now. People are excited. We have a candidate that we are excited about.
Yes.
And one group that is particularly engaged in ways that we haven't been before, I think, are Black women. I think we've always been heavily involved in the electoral process. We've been the backbone of the electorate.
Absolutely.
But it has been an outer body experience to see a candidate that looks like me, in my case, went to my university.
Mine too.
Okay.
HU.
You know. It has been insane. And Black women have been engaged. I mean, we've seen it in a multitude of ways. 40,000 showing up on Zoom.
Yes.
Them clearing Beyonce's song Freedom to be the song. Megan Thee Stallion performing.
Yes.
How do you intend to kind of capitalize on and really be a part of and appreciate this moment that we're seeing?
By centering the work of Black women. And that's something that we've always done at the foundation. We have something called the Sojourner Truth Legacy Project. It was started by the women of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Wow.
And through our Sojourner Truth Legacy Project, every year we have a policy discussion focused on issues that are important to Black women. And not only do we have those discussions, but we bring Black women to Washington to honor them. And they are not necessarily the Black women who have a name that you're going to see in the paper. They're not necessarily the Black women whose faces you're going to see on the local news at night. They are what I call the foot soldiers.
Yeah.
Those women who historically And you and I both know them. We are Black women. We come from Black families. We know those women, those unsung sheroes, who are the ones who take the babies and bring them in and feed them and clothe them and go over homework with them. They're the ones who, when they see someone out in the neighborhood who needs to be fed, who needs some additional support, they're the ones who are going to pull them to the side and say, I've got you. I'm here for you. That's what we do through our Sojourner Truth Legacy Project. And during ALC, we have a Sojourner Truth Legacy event where we again lift up those women, honor those women. So that is something that we have been doing and that we will continue to do, but that really just takes on new meaning right now. Because now not only do we know that those women are the backbone and deserve to be honored, everyone knows it. And we have to continue to sing their songs. We have to continue to tell, because it's about telling their stories. Those stories are so important, not just for us, but for the rest of the country. The rest of the country, and in fact, the rest of the world needs to understand that when you tell the story of the United States, when you tell the story of democracy, Black women are at the heart of that. And that's what's so important in this moment. And that's what we're going to see on display tonight when Kamala Harris accepts that nomination for President of the United States.
And like, how much of a moment is it going to be to seeing it on display? Because I feel like we're finally at the forefront. When you hear about every single movement, the civil rights movement, we've been on the front lines of women's rights movements, but we have never gotten the appreciation publicly that we deserved for being a part of those things. And so to see her, us, our families, our beings finally on the forefront to me is an emotional experience that I didn't think I'd ever see in my lifetime.
It's wonderful. And you know, the other thing that's really important right now, it is really important for Black women to give themselves permission to say, yes, this is our moment, and to see themselves and to appreciate ourselves. So often we are focused on everyone else that we need to help, every community that we want to uphold, every issue that we want to push forward for someone else. It is important to focus on appreciating who we are in this moment, to appreciate the sisterhood and the power of the sisterhood, and giving ourselves a moment to exhale and take it all in and say, yes, this is a moment where we have to own our leadership, own our successes, and own what we've given to this country, not in an arrogant way, but in a way to say, yes, we want to be counted too, and we too will be seen.
And we deserve it.
Exactly.
And I'm like trying to get to my questions. I just have the chills. I'm just overwhelmed with emotion because what you're saying is so true. I almost find a level of discomfort with it sometimes. And so I need to take your advice of really allowing myself to revel in this moment.
You have to own it. You have to own it. Own it and be proud of it. And look, that's what other communities do. It is a travesty that we have not allowed ourselves to do the same thing because we do deserve it.
We do.
And it is an example to all of the young women who are coming behind us. Their experiences are going to be so different than ours because they will see this shining moment, and they will see other Black women standing in their power. And they will not question at all whether they deserve it and whether that should be their own pathway. They will know it, and it will be assumed.
I love that. And you know what's interesting to me is what I'm experiencing now, so many other groups of people experience every time they go to the ballot box.
Yes.
Like they experience someone that associates them with race and gender. Like I remember I've experienced this with Obama when I went to vote for Obama. I experienced this with Hillary, but I'm experiencing it on both sides of my identity with just being both Black and a woman. It's overstimulating and amazing.
And for other people, they just take it for granted. Because that's the way it's been. And I look to the day when, for us, we take it for granted. Because we see it all the time because we are at the table.
That's amazing. And I mean, there is the exciting piece, but on the other side, we have seen a giant uptick in racism and misogyny that Kamala is experiencing because of her candidacy. It's been disheartening, but I think it's, in a sense, I don't even know if that's the word. I'm happy that the world is seeing it because they get to see what we go through on a day-to-day basis and the battles that she has to fight that no other candidate has had to fight. How are you all working to respond to those attacks or empower her in this moment as she goes through those things?
You know, as I mentioned earlier, we do research and focus on policy. I think the biggest tool that we have in our toolbox are facts, evidence, and truth. Facts, evidence, and truth. And that's how we will continue to combat those who want to tell different stories, those who want to speak untruths, by focusing on and digging in to our scholars, our policymakers, those people who have always stood on truth and facts and real evidence. And we will continue to share that information. We will continue to make sure that we have evidence-based data for the issues that we focus on. And we will continue to make sure that that information is in the hands of as many people as we can touch and get to. That is what matters. Data matters, evidence matters, truth and facts matter. And that's who we are at the foundation. Again, our Center for Policy Analysis and Research, and within that we have a National Racial Equity Initiative for Social Justice that really myopically focuses on race and justice. And we are going to continue to do that work and dig deep and dig our heels in on that work and make sure that we are speaking truth to power with the facts and the material and the research that we produce.
And that's the perfect way to honestly combat misinformation, which is what's needed in this moment. Because in the words of Michelle Obama's Day 2 speech, we do not have time for foolishness.
We do not at all, not at all. And look, we pride ourselves on being scholars. That's who we are at the foundation. We are scholars, we are policymakers, and we are proud of that legacy, that lineage, and that's what we know historically. We know that we have always been able to depend on that. So regardless of what other folks are doing, regardless of whatever trickery or other mechanisms are being used, we know historically that if we are steadfast and hold to that, that is what will get us to the next level. And I have to tell you this, I keep reminding people, do not be deterred about what we're seeing right now. Historically, in this country, and this is why history is so important. And this is why it's so important not to allow school systems around the country to change what we teach. Historically, we have seen in this country that when there are major achievements and advancements for Black and brown communities, there is always a backlash. But after that backlash, we then are elevated to an even higher level. So we know from history that we can have these moments, that we can get through them, and that we can then have some greater achievements that we can stand on from there. So that's why I always remind people, know your history, understand it, learn it, and depend upon it. Because we know from those experiences that we will get through this moment and we will be in a better place.
And that's the perfect way to pretty much end the episode, essentially, because we will get through this moment. And I have hope, and I feel like this episode has given so many people hope. And before I let you go and take you away from being my captive audience, something that makes this podcast unique is that we always end with an ask. A lot of times people are given information but not told what to do or how to change their perspectives. And so what is your ask for our listeners and our viewers?
My ask is for everyone. I'm going to look at your cameras.
Okay.
I want you all to own your power. Own your power. Understand that exactly where you sit, you have the opportunity to create change in your own communities. Don't wait for someone else to do it for you. Stand up right now, particularly the younger generations. I think they are a shining example of how we do this. Stand up right now. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Don't say, oh, I don't have a degree. Don't say, I don't have a fancy title. You don't need any of that. What you need is heart, passion, commitment, and conviction. You take that, you use the resources that are available at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. People can go to our website, cbcfinc.org. You can see materials. You can go to other major organizations that are doing critical work around race and justice, and you use those materials and you mobilize and you lead the change you want to see in your own communities. That's my ask.
That's the ask. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you tune into our next episode.